NATO defense ministers are meeting today to lay crucial groundwork ahead of this month's high-stakes summit in The Hague. Reportedly, the meeting in Hague would discuss increasing members' yearly fiscal contributions for defense spending, membership status for current and future members, as well as plans to bolster NATO defense capabilities in the future. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has reinforced President Trump's push for a dramatic boost in defense spending across the alliance, urging NATO members to commit 5% of their GDP, up from the current 2% target. Hegseth expressed confidence that all allies will align with Trump's demand before the June 24 to 25th summit in Hague. He also called for an end to the reliance on America. Let's take a listen.
The reason I'm here is to make sure every country in NATO understands every shoulder has to be to the plow. Every country has to contribute at that level of 5% as a recognition of the nature of the threat. But our message is going to continue to be clear. It's deterrence and peace through strength, but it can't be reliance. It cannot and will not be reliance. To be an alliance, you got to be more than flags. You got to be formations. You got to be more than conferences. You need to be combat-ready capabilities. So we're here to continue the work that President Trump started, which is a commitment to 5% defense spending across this alliance, which we think will happen, which we think has to happen by the summit at The Hague later this month.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said he expects allies to agree today on what he called historic new capability targets, the targets which define how many troops and weapons and how much ammunition a country needs to provide to NATO, would aim to better balance defense contributions between Europe, Canada, the United States, and enhance NATO's overall readiness and firepower, and also make this alliance stronger and more lethal. Rutte has also floated a compromise promising 3.5% for core defense and an additional 1.5% for broader security-related investments. Let's take a listen to what Mark Rutte had to say.
It will be an important meeting of defense ministers. It is the last big meeting we will have before the summit in The Hague, and today is really key because we will decide on the capability targets. And this is an important building block to decide on the money we're going to spend in the coming years on defense. That will be a considerable extra investment. And this is why I predict that in The Hague we will decide on a much higher spending target for all the nations in NATO. Because we have to invest in our air defense systems, we have to invest in our let's say long-range missiles, we have to invest in our maneuverable land formations, command and control systems. All of this has to happen. And these mean huge investments. We need all over NATO territory. And by the way, doing this will also equalize what we are spending with what the United States is spending. We, Canada and Europe, equalizing with the US. And we know this is important because we want a fairer NATO where all our allies
In a significant move, Ukraine's defense minister has announced that Kyiv will receive up to 1.3 billion euros from its allies next year to ramp up domestic weapons production, marking a major show of continued support amid the ongoing war. Germany, for its part, says it will need to add as many as 60,000 active troops to meet new NATO benchmarks. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius insisted the alliance must clearly name Russia as its greatest threat in the upcoming summit declaration. Now we have two guests joining us, Keith Vaz, former UK minister from London, and Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow Hudson Institute from Tokyo, Japan. Thank you for joining us today. So Mr. Watts, what are the primary objectives of the NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels ahead of the upcoming summit in The Hague?
Well, I think that we are in a very dangerous situation now, in the sense of what the Americans expect the European countries to do. On the one hand, they're asking for an increase in defense expenditure well over what they're currently spending. And on the other hand, these EU countries and some of the other European countries like Britain are being hit by the Americans with tariffs. So what is the objective here? Is it actually to try and work with allies, or is it to make it impossible for this alliance to actually succeed? These are big questions that are going to have to be answered at the NATO summit. All these countries are facing grave domestic issues that they need to contend with. Now they're being asked to increase expenditure. To be fair to President Trump, this is what he has always said. I think what needs to happen now is the European nations need to work together to see what kind of European initiative they can put together, because they're certainly not going to be able to afford an increase in defense expenditure to the amount that the Americans want, at the same time grappling with these huge increases in tariffs that President Trump announced only this week. They've been put in an impossible situation. I feel sorry for Mark Rutte. He's been a prime minister himself, so he knows the pressure on domestic budgets. It's going to be very tough for them to meet these kinds of spending limits. It's just not going to happen. And something's got to give in the end. Either the alliance is going to fall to pieces under this stress, or the Americans are going to have to back down. It can't be both.
Right, and now on to you, Dr. Nagao. How are NATO member states responding to proposals for increased defense spending, including the suggested 5% of the GDP target?
Currently, the European country try to catch up, adjust demand from the United States. But indeed, for a long time, they haven't catched up. The demand came from the United States, because indeed the history of the demand from the United States, which did ask the European country to increase the defense spending, is indeed it had started in the end of the Obama administration. So Obama administration, first Trump administration, 4 years in the Biden administration, and now the first year of the Trump administration, second time. For a long time, the United States continued to demand to increase European defense budget, but it hasn't reached a certain level. So unfortunately, view from the United States, European country need to increase the defense budget more, and finally they have started to show seriousness to reply to this demand. Why this is very important? Because the United States want to withdraw from Europe and concentrate the effort to China in the Indo-Pacific. So that's why, in this case, European security rely on the European countries. That is needed. And in this case, despite Russia's aggression to Ukraine has started, despite such kind of situation, still the European defense industry hasn't provided enough number of ammunition to Ukraine. That is very serious problem, because European security, which is serious for Europe, not the United States, not other country. So most important serious problem, the Russia's aggression to Ukraine, is Europe's problem mainly. So that's why Europeans must increase the defense budget and try to be strong and try to prepare enough support for Ukraine. That is very important. But generally, the production line demands 3 years to produce many ammunition or many weapons. So this year is 4th year since Russia's aggression started. So despite this, not enough level of the defense industry each European country hasn't achieved. So that is unfortunately each European need to be serious. That is the situation, I believe. Thank you.
And now, with that in mind, Sir Watts, what do you think will be the impact of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war on NATO spending?
Well, it's a very good question, Asma, because the fact is the European nations themselves are helping the Ukraine independently of NATO. Each countries, such as my own, United Kingdom, have pledged additional support for Ukraine, irrespective of NATO. So this is happening anyway. And that is why probably there will be a feeling in Brussels that it's perhaps about time, and The Hague, that perhaps it's about time that Europe steps up itself and provides these capabilities without having to rely on the Americans, which is why only this week Keir Starmer in the UK announced more munitions factories being built in the United Kingdom itself. So rather than use your money to buy American weapons, you use your money on your own domestic economies and spend that money yourselves. But the Ukraine war would never have continued as long as it has without the support of individual NATO countries helping President Zelensky. And without their help, it just would not, we would not be there today. So it's interesting to hear from the Americans. I think it's going to be a tough meeting. It's not going to be easy. And I don't think the European countries are going to be able to come up with this money. There just isn't enough money there. European taxpayers don't have this kind of resources available. And that is why we've always relied on the Americans. That's what the alliance is all about. It's an alliance to deal with outside threats. And that means in an alliance, not everyone pays the same. People pay different amounts of money. So let's see, what is in America's strategic interests? Is it the defense of Europe as a way of defending America? Or are they just going to step back and allow the Europeans to do this themselves? So these are crucial times. And that's why it's important to consider very carefully what the consequences of what Pete Hegseth is going to ask for.
And now, switching focus for a moment to the outcomes, Dr. Nagao, how might the outcomes of these meetings influence NATO's approach to collective defense and global security challenges?
The United States has continued to support Ukraine, that is true, but because the United States do not have the will to lose the war in Ukraine. But at the same time, Europeans should share more security burden with the United States. That is the opinion of the United States. Because the last 3 years, the US continues to support European countries, and the view from the United States, Europeans rely too much on the United States. Because the United States, China is the main threat now. So need to deal with China. In this case, the United States needs money to catch up to effort from China. China is building more than 100 warships at the same time now. So last 1 decade, 148 ships China inducted. This is the same size of Japan's maritime self-defense force or Indian Navy. So such kind of rapid military modernization is happening in the Indo-Pacific. So under such kind of situation, if the United States need to share the heavy burden in Europe, United States cannot catch up to such kind of rapid changing situation in Indo-Pacific. So that's why not only Europe, but also the Middle East, or Afghanistan, other areas, the US want to withdraw and share the security burden with the local allies. But European hasn't prepared enough in the past. So that's why today, European shows strong will to be strong. So that is good news for the United States. And so that's why the consequence, the view from consequence, if the European will be very strong, that is a very good consequence for the United States too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao and Sir Keith Vaz for joining.